House of the Dragon is back this week with episode 2, and it followed on directly after the sickening acts of blood and cheese in the closing moments of the premiere. With a declaration of war being announced by King Aegon and division being present not only amongst Rhaenyra and her house, but also Aegon, the council and his family. The civil war that was present is not only external now, but it's one that seems to be disintegrating from within King's Landing and also Dragonstone. Trust and advice is going out the window, and whether it be Aegon not listening to Ser Otto or Daemon betraying Rhaenyra, both sides are making themselves weaker by their own actions. An unstable house is one that's not fit to rule, and that's present on both sides. With Viserys being looked back on a lot in this episode, and the peace that he held being something that can only be dreamed of right now, let's jump into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. I'm going to break this video down by the main characters and their arcs, as there was a lot that was going on with each of them. King Aegon. This episode started off with us seeing King Aegon mourning his son and seeing him in hysterics over the fact that he was slain in his own bed. There was a sense of blame that he was putting on many different people. For example, he wondered where Sir Cole was. He wasn't speaking with Helana and put an ounce of blame on her, and he also blamed his mother as he questioned where she was too. I questioned the reasoning behind his mourning. Obviously, he loved his son, but in the first episode, we saw that he didn't know if it was his daughter or his son that was in the room with him, and he also didn't know where he was. There was a line in this episode where he said how Jahaerys was his legacy, so I feel he could be mourning the fact that his legacy is now broken, rather than the love that he had for his son. It's hard to tell, but seeing how egotistical King Aegon is, that could well be the case. Larys planted the seed in Aegon's mind in the previous episode about Ser Otto being his hand and how he was Viserys' hand and not his. Yet he found himself in a position of power where he was being advised by his grandfather. And when Aegon fired Ser Otto, that was the same line that he spoke, showing that Larys' poisoned words were what spared him to make that decision. Aegon isn't fit to be king, and I think we're all seeing that. He acts on impulse rather than with intelligence and logic, ruling with an iron fist rather than with his mind, and that was best shown to us by the way that he unraveled all of the hard work that Ser Otto did to make the people sympathize with the family, by ultimately going on and slaughtering all of the rat catchers that worked for him. Many innocent men died for the sake of one being caught, and Cheese was in fact caught as we saw his dog looking up as his body was there. So Cole becoming the hand is something that I think will prove to be dangerous. He doesn't have the required knowledge to be able to advise the king where it's best. And I actually think Ser Otto showed his worth and value in this episode. I've never been the biggest fan of Ser Otto, but his strategic plan to get the people on side was something that I thought was smart and would have definitely helped the king. King Aegon declared war and diplomatic measures are no longer going to be an option with Ser Otto out of the equation, so all-out violence with no ounce of humanity is very much on the horizon. Aegon viewed his father as weak, but he did a good job in keeping the peace amongst Westeros. Aegon only really ever knew his father as he was dying. He was on a downward spiral from the moment that he was born, so I wonder if that's why he has this view of Viserys and feels like he needs to act in a completely different way. Ser Otto. Ser Otto is a snake, there's no denying that. He very much betrayed Viserys and went against his wishes and was going behind his back in order to make sure that his own family name had a stake to the Iron Throne, which meant having it pass over Rhaenyra and going to Viserys' firstborn son Aegon once he ensured that his daughter Alicent married him. However now, I feel there might be a sense of regret and mourning for his former friend. The fact that Ser Otto felt as though they were all the more poorer for it now that Viserys was dead, I think it showed that not only did he miss his friend, but he knew that turbulent times were not too far away. Ser Otto was able to advise Viserys and he valued his opinion and advice, whereas with Aegon, he doesn't listen at all, and he does the opposite and unravels all of the hard work and foundation laying that Ser Otto does. Ser Otto gets the people on side, Aegon undoes it and shows a different side to the crown, one which makes people fear them, rather than love them and sympathize and empathize with them. I actually think Ser Otto carried a lot of this episode. Seeing how his mind worked so quickly in front of the council and devising a plan to utilize Jahaerys' death to go in their favor was impressive to watch. Granted, it showed that there wasn't that much emotion inside of him, but still. I also thought the conversation that he had with Aegon, where he spoke his true mind and ultimately resulted in being removed as Hand of the King, was a really tense scene that showed that Otto just wants what's best for his family. But more importantly, the retention of their position on the Iron Throne. With him no longer being important to the king, we're now going to be seeing him heading to Highgarden with the intention of getting the Tyrells on side as they're currently wavering and unsure of their loyalty. The care for his family is something that is interesting to follow. He cares in the sense that he wants them to hold their position of power, but when it comes to actual issues that are directly going on with them, he fails to have any sense of empathy or desire to help them deal with them. For example, with Aegon, there was no sense of comfort following him losing his son, and also when Alicent, his daughter, wanted to confide in him over the fact that she felt as though she'd sinned, he simply said, "I do not wish to hear of it," showing that he'd rather be removed from the personal level of it. Alicent comforted him and reassured him that Aegon's blood may end up cooling and he may be able to return after listening to him share his problems, but he wasn't prepared to return the favour. Alicent is riddled with guilt, and it feels like there's a sense of paranoia there, not only because she's being intimate with Ser Criston Cole and she knows that she shouldn't be. Helana also saw Ser Criston Cole and Alicent together, but also because she feels that Jahaerys' death was a punishment from the gods because of the sinning that she feels as though she's been carrying out. Alicent was truly mourning Jahaerys, and she questioned whether or not it would have been Rhaenyra's orders to enact that type of revenge. In the previous episode, we heard Aemond refer to Alicent as weak, and she also said Lucerys' name when she lit a candle and said a prayer. So it shows that her mindset is one that's maybe a bit more understanding and sympathetic of Rhaenyra and all that she's been through, probably due to the fact that she knew her from such a young age, and it was Ser Otto who moulded her into the person that she was in the present day in wanting to secure their family line to the throne. In the closing moments of the episode, we saw that she went to see Aegon, but he was still in mourning, and she almost couldn't bring herself to comfort him. So instead, she went to her chamber and had Ser Criston Cole there, and they were intimate with one another. Again. Showing that she's going to keep going back regardless, and it's almost because she can't let out her issues in the way of speaking because there's no shoulder for her to cry on. She ends up going to him, hence why we saw aggression. The anger that she had towards herself was being let out on him. Helana didn't have too large of an involvement in this episode of the show, but I feel we really got to see a good side to the character. There was a lot of criticism over her reaction to having to choose Jahaerys to be killed and the fact that she seemed quite numb in the decision making. But this episode did the opposite. We saw her gradually getting deeper and deeper into her own mind and mourning the death of the child and feeling the weight of the responsibility of choosing which one that needed to die. The scene during the funeral was something that I thought was just so perfectly done. Time was moving so slow for her because of the pain that was being felt, and we saw her having a panic attack when the wagon was stuck in the road. I think we're going to see Helana start to unravel and lose any ounce of stability that she had. It's probably going to fester in her mind for a long while, and she'll never be the same again. Aegon isn't speaking with her, and she's quite literally all alone. So I think that will ultimately cause her demise. The guilt and loneliness will be too much for her. Daemon. Within this episode, we saw that Daemon still had a sense of resentment towards Rhaenyra for him being passed over and becoming next in line to the throne after Viserys. If you remember back to Season 1, there was controversy because Rhaenyra was named heir when Viserys didn't have a male child, and Daemon felt as though he deserved it. That's something that he holds onto still, as it came up in an argument between Rhaenyra and himself following Rhaenyra finding out that Daemon had some involvement in the killing of Jahaerys. Daemon was proud about the death of the king's son, and seeing him sitting there with a smirk on his face whilst everybody was panicking over the repercussions was quite humorous. Him going behind Rhaenyra's back is something which shows us that there is a sense of undermining that's at play. He doesn't trust what Rhaenyra has to offer, hence why he takes things into his own hands. He felt as though he did good in bringing the war closer and enacting revenge for the death of Lucerys. He wanted the war, and the war is getting closer, especially due to his orders to Blood and Cheese. But with him riding off at the end, I feel we're going to see the anger that he has within him being let out in a completely different way. Rhaenyra. Considering Rhaenyra had lost her son recently, I actually think she's holding up pretty well now. The closure that she desired was something that definitely helped her with moving on, and she didn't seem as numb as what she did in the first episode. We saw the humanity that Rhaenyra had within her when she found out the news of Jahaerys' death and the fact that it was being pinned on her. She knew what it was like to lose a young child, and she didn't want to pass that pain on to somebody else, somebody that she never had any true issues with directly. Her conflict with Daemon was something which showed a stronger side to her. She openly said that she didn't trust him, and it very much feels like she's going to be leading on her own for the time being. Maybe even with Mysaria by her side, following her coming to the rescue and notifying Erryk that Arryk had found a way into the castle. She is showing that she's genuinely the better person to be sat on the Iron Throne. And with Ser Otto saying to Aegon, "You think that's what your father wanted," when Aegon believed that his father wanted him to be king, even Ser Otto knows the true intentions of Viserys and the fact that Rhaenyra would have been better. She's going to have to be on the defensive massively with an unpredictable Aegon, but with her sending Baelor to fly over King's Landing to keep an eye on what's going on, the defense plan has already started. Her own council might even start wavering because they may genuinely believe that she had some involvement in being an infant slayer, so it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Aemond. We didn't have much involvement from Aemond in this episode, but what was interesting was the fact that he said that he had an ounce of regret over what he did to Viserys when he killed him. He said that he acted in a moment of rage because of what happened many years ago and the fact that he used to be teased. Family discussions and helping each other out doesn't seem like it's present amongst the Hightowers. Ser Otto didn't comfort Alicent, Alicent didn't comfort Aegon, and Aemond was seeking comfort with strangers. The physicality of Aemond in being exposed was something which was reflective of the state of his mind that he was in during that moment, and it highlighted that he had a lot that he wanted to get off of his chest. Even the fact that Daemon wanted him dead and that he was feared by him. I'm hoping we're going to get a Daemon and Aemond epic fight. The Cargylls. The crescendo of this episode came from the fact that Ser Arryk was tasked by Criston Cole to slay Rhaenyra in Dragonstone by pretending to be his twin brother, Ser Erryk. This was actually a plan that was so close to working, but with Rhaenyra freeing Mysaria, she spotted Erryk boarding the shores and heading towards the castle. I feel she made it to the castle in time and told Erryk what was most likely going to be happening. This was a fight scene that we've seen in all classic movies and TV shows, where there are two people that look the same and you just don't know which one is good and which one is evil. One thing that I thought was heartbreaking about this scene was the fact that even though the brothers swore loyalty to different sides following King Viserys' death, the love that was present between them was something which was there until the very end. So much so that even once Ser Arryk was killed by his brother, Erryk ended things for himself and asked Rhaenyra for forgiveness before doing so, showing quite the opposite to the family feud that's going on amongst the fight for the crown. My review of the episode. I thought this was a good episode of the show. It was a very character-driven episode that allowed us to spend time with the characters in an intimate way. Hence why I structured the video in this way, because I feel we saw inside of their minds in a way that we didn't in the first episode. Guilt is present amongst everybody, even Criston Cole, hence why he took matters into his own hands in asking Erryk to go to Dragonstone due to him being completely absent the night that Jahaerys was murdered. However now, with him becoming hand to the king, that guilt is only going to increase because he's obviously being intimate with the king's mother. The pacing of this episode was also perfect. I'm glad we had a long episode because it really needed the runtime in order to allow the depth and weight of the conversations that were had to breathe and then be able to move on. Whilst there wasn't that much action, there was still a lot of darkness within it, such as the ratcatchers being rounded up and killed, blood quaking in his boots as death was fast approaching, and also the fight that took place between the brothers at the end. I think all of the performances within the show were really strong, but for me, Ser Otto was the standout character in this week's episode. Every word that he uttered had all of us there waiting for what he was going to say next, and seeing him being removed from his place of power where he was essentially the puppet master and had been successfully doing so for a long time, it showed that he lost the very thing that mattered to him most, and that was perfectly performed. With the preview for the next episode being released, it looks like it's gonna be a dark one, and it's one that I'm really looking forward to watching, so bring it on. So, there you have it. If you want to see more videos on House of the Dragon, then click on the card in the top corner. There's an entire playlist there, or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.